1.5 million quid because it is arguably the best battle tank of World War II.
Hidden in forests, buried in river mud, and locked away in barns for decades, these are the mechanical ghosts of the Third Reich. From Hitler's own armoured limousines, discovered in pieces, to legendary tanks pulled from watery graves. These aren't just rusting wrecks. They are time capsules from the war, each with a story of panic, retreat, and a desperate attempt to hide the evidence. Join us as we uncover these German machines and the dark secrets they left behind. Number 20. VW Type 166 Schwimmwagen. The murky river in a small Polish village kept a secret for nearly 80 years. In 2023, that secret was finally hauled ashore. The corroded hull of a German Panther tank. Local historians, using a magnetometer, pinpointed the massive wreck buried deep in silt and weed. This was not a tank torn apart in a blaze of battle. Rather, it was a machine left behind during a frantic retreat in 1945, likely abandoned when its crew failed to cross the water. Pulling it free took cranes, divers, and patient planning, as decades of mud and plants had fused to armor and running gear. Up close, the Panther feels like a ruined monument. Warped plates, pitted steel, a hollow interior that once held men and fear. It is a blunt, physical witness to the chaotic, brutal ending of a war. An object that forces viewers to look at loss rather than to admire machinery. Conservators plan to stabilize and display the wreck in a museum where its silence can teach future generations. Number 19. Mercedes-Benz 540K Action P. In the 1990s, a team of American collectors made an incredible discovery scattered across several dilapidated Latvian barns. They were looking at the disassembled pieces of a Mercedes-Benz 540K, one of only 20 specially armored cars built for the highest-ranking officials of the Nazi regime. As their power collapsed, someone had taken immense effort to hide this symbol of their authority, perhaps hoping to use it again. That day never came, and the car sat in pieces for decades. Its recovery was a complex historical jigsaw puzzle. Today, this vehicle, restored as a multi-million-dollar museum piece, stands for a very specific purpose. It is a tangible relic of the elite who orchestrated immense suffering, a cold, mechanical witness to history that now serves as a crucial, if uncomfortable, artifact for the world to remember. 80 years. In 2023, the Volkswagen Typ 166 Schwimmwagen was a clever piece of engineering, an amphibious vehicle that could drive on roads and paddle across rivers. Thousands were used on the brutal Eastern Front, and when the German military retreated, they were left behind like discarded toys. The fascinating thing is, they are still out there. As recovery specialist Anton Belousov confirms, you can still find these vehicles in Russian woods, fields, and swamps. Time has not been kind. Most are just rusted hulls being slowly consumed by the earth. Finding one is not about celebrating its original purpose, but about recovering a piece of complex history from complete decay. Each salvage operation is a race against time, preserving a flawed but ingenious machine so we can study its design and remember the full, complex story of the era it came from. And display the wreck in a museum. The Panzer IV was the backbone of the German armored divisions, a common sight across Europe. But the journey of the one in the Wheatcroft collection is anything but common. This machine wasn't pulled from a battlefield, it was saved from a quiet life as a Norwegian army workhorse. After the war, instead of being scrapped, it was used for training, its iconic silhouette just another piece of military equipment. It's a bizarre second chapter for a vehicle designed for war. The restoration process was an archaeological dig through these different layers of history. Specialists had to carefully remove the post-war modifications and repaints to uncover the original tank beneath. Every bolt turned was a step back in time. This Panzer IV now exists in a strange state, a veteran of conflict that never was, a ghost returned to its original form not by a fiery end, but by the patient hands of historians, a mechanical witness to history that now serves as a crucial, if the 1992 hunt for the armored Mercedes 540K uncovered an even bigger prize, a massive Mercedes 770K. This was the absolute pinnacle of Nazi motor cars, a colossal vehicle used by Hitler, Himmler, and Göring. It was a rolling throne, a symbol of their power. But the one found in a remote Latvian shed was a ghost in a broken shell. Post-war owners had hacked it apart. The immense, hand-built body was likely fitted with a crude truck engine and other non-original parts, stripping it of its terrifying grandeur. This wasn't a restoration project, it was an archaeological tragedy. The hunt for this car reveals a fascinating truth about these relics. Their value isn't just in the metal, but in their unbroken history. This 770,000 had lost that. It became a Frankenstein's monster of a car, a shadow of the dictator's chariot it once was. Its discovery is a story of a different kind of loss, not in a battlefield, but in a shed, where ignorance and time dismantled a monster piece by piece, leaving only a hollow, complicated shell behind. It's anything but common. This machine wasn't Don't call the Stug III a tank. It is a different beast. Built on a Panzer III chassis, it had no rotating turret. Its main gun was fixed in a casemate, making it a specialist. It was an assault gun to punch through bunkers and support infantry, not to trade shots in open maneuvers. That fixed gun is why intact survivors are uncommon. Many Stugs were dug in and served as mobile bunkers until they were knocked out or left behind. When one turns up whole, it often tells of a hurried retreat. Crews abandoned them in ditches or among trees, where mud, rust, and roots slowly took them. The Wheatcroft collection example is one of those rare finds. Its low shape shows only purpose. Restoring a Stug asks specific questions about life inside: the loader, the driver, and the limited sightlines that shaped how they fought. Seen today, it is the harsh, bleak, and workmanlike face of war, a reminder to study and remember, not to admire, by Hitler, Himmler, and Göring. The Panzer III is often overlooked beside heavier tanks, but it delivered a strike. In the early blitzkrieg drives, it acted as a spearhead, pushing forward and probing defenses. The Wheatcroft example is a time capsule. Restoring it is forensic work, not just welding and paint, but reviving a complex machine whose manuals and parts are rare. Restorers turn into detectives, sourcing original bolts, rebuilding wiring, and working out the engineer's logic. The engine is a locked jigsaw of precisely made parts frozen by decades. Getting it to turn is as much a historian's victory as a mechanic's. Inside, the cramped array of levers and gauges puts you in the shoes of a young crewman, amid heat and noise. The Panzer III should not be honored. Up close, it is a scarred object, showing strain, error, and haste. Its dents and patched plates show hurried repairs and human cost. It also helps us see how technology and people met in grim times and why we must not praise the past. Its main gun was fixed in a casemate, sitting on the grounds of the Wagen Fighters Museum is a simple, weathered boxcar. But this isn't just any old piece of railway history, it's a silent witness to the Holocaust. Manufactured in 1899, this authentic German wagon was later repurposed for horror. It was one of the thousands used to transport millions of people, Jews, prisoners of war, and others deemed undesirable, to concentration and extermination camps. Imagine the sheer terror inside this very space. Up to 200 people were crammed into this dark, airless chamber with no food or water, not knowing their fate. After the war, it was abandoned at a depot, a forgotten relic of atrocity. The museum has chosen not to restore it, but to preserve it exactly as is. Its scarred wooden shell is untouched. It stands not as a glamorous military relic, but as a sobering, essential memorial to the lives lost, ensuring we never forget the human cost of hatred and intolerance. And probing defenses. The Wheatcroft example is in the Canadian War Museum. There's one artifact that always makes visitors stop and stare. It's an ink-black, colossal Mercedes 770 limousine, and it feels incredibly imposing. This was no ordinary car. It was a technological marvel for its time, an armored parade vehicle built for the highest ranks of the Nazi elite. Its story of how it crossed the Atlantic is incredible. In May 1945, with the war in Europe nearly over, an American soldier named Sergeant Joe Azara was near the German-Austrian border. He discovered this gigantic limousine just sitting there, abandoned on a railway flat car. He decided to take it as a war prize. The passenger side window is still spiderwebbed with cracks, a permanent scar from its past. It's a complicated relic, a masterpiece of engineering that served a monstrous regime, now captured by a single soldier and put on display for everyone to see and remember. But this isn't just any old piece of railway history. It's a silent witness. The Sd.Kfz, Kettenkrad, is one of the weirdest and most ingenious vehicles of the entire war. It's a bizarre hybrid, a motorcycle at the front, with handlebars and a seat, but with tank tracks at the back instead of a rear wheel. It was designed for German paratroopers, tough enough to be dropped from a plane and then carry men and supplies through the deepest mud and snow. But the most incredible part of its story began after the fighting stopped. The war ended, but the Kettenkrad's life was just beginning. The factory that built them simply kept going, producing another 550 brand new vehicles. Their new mission was not war, but agriculture. These rugged machines became indispensable on difficult German farms, towing plows and carts where ordinary tractors would get hopelessly stuck. It's a strange and peaceful second act for a weapon of war. This little vehicle successfully made the journey from a Nazi war machine to a humble farmer's helper, a transformation few other weapons ever managed. Colossal Mercedes 770 limousine, the story of the Panther tank Cuckoo is a perfect tale of battlefield irony. This formidable German tank, one of the most feared of the war, was abandoned by its crew in France in perfect working order. Instead of destroying it, British soldiers from the Coldstream Guards had a better idea. They simply refueled it, loaded its ammunition, and drove it into their own ranks. They nicknamed it Cuckoo because it had been laid in their nest. Imagine the shock of German soldiers being shelled by one of their own best tanks. Cuckoo was even used to meticulously bombard a German-held castle, its own superior armor and gun now turned against its creators. It served faithfully with the British for the rest of the war. This captured Panther wasn't a mere trophy. It was a frontline combatant in its captor's army. Its story is a brilliant example of wartime pragmatism, using the enemy's own weapon to fight back. Is one of the weirdest and most ingenious vehicles of the entire war. The Jagdpanzer 38T nicknamed Hetzer, was a small, low-profile tank destroyer. It was cheap to build and a deadly ambush predator, hiding in wait for much larger tanks. But when the Third Reich fell, the Hetzer's service was far from over. The factories that built it, now located in Czechoslovakia, simply continued production. They built hundreds of new vehicles, almost identical to the wartime model. In a fascinating post-war twist, neutral Switzerland bought 158 of these Czech-built Hetzers. The Swiss army, always pragmatic, gave it a new name, the G13. So, for years after the war, the peaceful Swiss Alps were patrolled by a design that was once a key part of the Nazi war machine. It's a vehicle that truly transcended its dark origins. The Hetzer found a second life, serving a neutral country, proving that the design was so effective it could outlive the ideology that created it. Number 8. Sd.Kfz 232. This is the Stug 232, an armored car that was an engineering marvel. It was more than a truck with metal on it. Designed with 8 wheels, each wheel could be driven and many could be steered, giving it better grip on rough ground than most wheeled vehicles. A neat set of gears and shafts linked everything, so power flowed to each wheel without fuss. The most striking feature was the full driving station at the rear. The driver could turn round and use rear controls to drive away at the same top speed as forwards, on a scouting run behind enemy lines that could save lives. No slow turning, no wide loops, just a quick change of place and you were gone. Radio gear, firm suspension, and a tall armored body made it a steady scout. It was not built for long fights, but for fast moves and quick returns. It shows a German habit for design and practical mechanics aimed at keeping forces on the move. Number 7. Sd.Kfz 234 Puma. The Sd.Kfz 234 Puma is a story of a vehicle meant for one war but used in another. It was a heavy armored car with an air-cooled engine, ideal for dry deserts. That made it a strong choice for North Africa, yet it came into service after the Afrika Korps had already left. Instead of being wasted, the Puma went east to the muddy, frozen battlefields against the Soviet Union. Its engine and solid frame proved useful there as well. On patrol, it could move fast and keep up with tanks, and its good suspension took the shocks of rough roads. The most dangerous version was the Wagon, a long 75mm anti-tank gun mounted on the chassis. That change turned the Puma from a quiet scout into a dangerous hunter. The light body could get the gun into position and withdraw before heavy units closed. The Puma shows how war forces adapt tools for new tasks and make the best of what is at hand in very harsh conditions. Number 6. Kfz 13 Adler. The Kfz 13 Adler shows what happens when speed and cost outweigh proper design. In the early 1930s, Germany needed armored cars fast, so designers welded a thin armored shell onto a civilian Adler Standard 6 saloon. The result was an awkward compromise. The added weight and higher body raised the center of gravity, so sharp turns could lead to rollovers. The thin steel gave only basic protection against small arms and shrapnel, and the two-wheel drive limited off-road ability, making it ill-matched to heavy military use. Crews adapted. They favored firmer tracks, kept speeds down, and tried to avoid rough ground. Still, the Kfz-13 was used in early campaigns where shortages left commanders little choice. It is a reminder of how political pressure and industrial limits can force armies to use improvised tools that exposed crews to extra risk and offered little real protection. Service records and accounts show crews faced regular breakdowns, exposure, and added danger from inadequate protection and poor cross-country performance. And poor morale, too. Number 5. Goliath Demolition Vehicle. The Goliath looks like a toy gone wrong, a tiny tracked box carrying a deadly load. It was a remote-controlled explosive carrier, barely bigger than a large suitcase, meant to be driven up to tanks, bunkers, or bridges and blown up. Different versions carried about 60 or 100 kilograms of explosives, and they were steered from a control box on a long cable. In practice, the idea was odd and often unlucky. The cable could be cut by artillery or snag on rubble, and the little machine could get stuck or be easily jammed. Crews sometimes used Goliaths in cities and during uprisings, which made them cruel tools in close fighting. They saw action on many fronts, including Normandy and Warsaw, but they were single-use and vulnerable. What feels strange today is how ahead of its time the concept was: an unmanned vehicle sent into danger, yet so crude and risky that it rarely lived up to the promise. It's a weird mix of clever engineering and grim improvised warfare. Number 4. Volkswagen Kubelwagen. The Kubelwagen is oddly familiar. It borrows much from the civilian Beetle and looks simpler than many wartime machines. Designed from the same platform as the Volkswagen Type 1, it used the Beetle's air-cooled engine and light chassis to make a small, reliable utility car. It had a high ground clearance and a clever portal axle setup, which gave it surprisingly good off-road ability for such a light vehicle. Because it was cheap and easy to build, it was made in large numbers and became one of the most common German transport vehicles of the war. Crews liked that it was simple to fix, easy on fuel, and tolerant of rough use, the sort of basic virtues that matter when supplies are thin. Yet its fame is awkward. This ordinary, useful machine was pressed into service by a regime that caused great harm. So the Kubelwagen is interesting not as something to praise, but as a reminder of how normal factory products were turned into tools for war. Number 3. Maus Super Heavy Tank. The Maus is the kind of machine you expect to see in a cartoon about excess: huge, slow, and absurd. Designed to weigh well over 100 tons, often quoted around 188 tons, it had armor so thick and a main gun so large that its makers aimed to make it almost unkillable by contemporary weapons. The result was enormous mass and a long list of problems: bridges that could not take its weight, engines that strained under the load, and such slow speed that it would be easy prey to air attack or simply unable to reach the battlefield in time. Only prototypes and partial hulls were finished. It never fought. The Maus shows how obsession with bigger and tougher can produce something impressive on paper but useless in the real world. It's a clear example of extreme engineering pushed to a political aim, an experiment in weight and armor that failed to solve the practical tests of fuel, movement, and logistics. The lone prototype that survives now sits as a strange museum piece, more a warning than a wonder. Number 2. BMW Schneekrad. The BMW Schneekrad was one of those strange ideas that makes you wonder what was happening in the design room. Imagine a normal motorbike at the front, but then replace the back wheel with a chunky snowmobile-style track. The aim was simple enough: build a bike that could move across deep snow without sinking or wobbling all over the place. Germany's winter campaigns were brutal, and normal motorbikes often stalled or got stuck, so engineers came up with this odd hybrid. It handled snow better than a regular bike, but it wasn't exactly graceful. Riding it was said to feel a bit like balancing on a jittery toboggan. The track offered good grip, But turning was awkward, and the mix of wheels and track made maintenance a headache. Crews often found that frozen mud and ice jammed the moving parts, which didn't help when temperatures dropped to frightening lows. Still, it's the kind of machine that grabs your attention today, not because it was successful, but because it shows how far wartime designers were willing to go when trying to fix a problem. A curious mix of creativity, desperation, and cold weather. Number 1. Mercedes-Benz G4. The Mercedes-Benz G4 is one of those vehicles that looks like it should belong in a film set, not real life. With 6 wheels, a long body, and a stance that could only be described as too big for its own good, it was built to drive important officials around rough ground. It wasn't meant for combat. It was basically a rolling showpiece, part parade car, part oversized off-roader. Despite its fancy looks, the G4 was surprisingly capable on uneven ground. The front 4 wheels were all powered, giving it decent grip on dirt tracks, forest paths, and bumpy fields. But it was also huge, heavy, and not the easiest thing to maneuver. If it got stuck, you couldn't simply push it out of a ditch. And with its long wheelbase, tight corners were not its friend. Most people today remember the G4 not for its performance, but because it became a symbol of over-the-top engineering during a dark period in history. It shows how resources were spent building grand, impractical machines meant more for display than real use.